Yo. 2005 Higher Than High Lander. This thing's got a couple of codes, a P0016, P0018. A lot of times when you get both of these codes at the same time, it's for both camshafts, and it's because the timing belt skipped a tooth or more. There's no coolant in the thing. I mean, the radiator's low. I don't know how low. There's no water in the reservoir. I took one bolt off of this cover and I just kind of peeled it back a little bit. The belt looks like a belt, but I can see inside there, the cover, there's water all over in there. I went online and had her pick out a kit from eBay. These guys have really good reviews and they claim that it's all Asian. Timing belt kit. It's got the V-belts in it, coil, Toyota. An Aisin water pump, but it's a USA pump. Aisin is not as good as it used to be because a lot of their pumps now are made in America. I wanted a Japanese kit. They listed this with two different water pump boxes. There's a blue box that has a Japanese pump, and then this white box is an American pump. So it's not up to snuff. I'm really disappointed about that. So I went to Napa and I got an NPW water pump. These are Japanese parts, and it's Nissan Pump Manufacturing Company. So it's Japan. So these are good pumps. I can even look at both of them and I can notice a difference. Here's the Japanese pump. Here's the Aisin pump. Plastic impeller, metal impeller. I can even turn this thing and it feels tighter. The tolerances are a little different. 21 millimeters. I have a splash shield here with a couple 10 millimeters on it. There's a plastic clip buried behind this panel. I'm not taking the rest of this off, so I should be able to just push this in, this button. There's a balancer holding tool you can use for this to get this bolt off. I'm going to try to use an impact. There is an actual Toyota tool you can buy to hold this harmonic balancer. I bought this off of eBay a long time ago from some machinist that just makes these. And pretty good price, and they work pretty good. Crank this thing over until it hits that mount. Then I'll just take this off with a breaker bar. One other thing I like to do before I dive into this job is get these two bolts off right here for this mount. They go through on the bottom of these mounts, and a lot of times they corrode in and they don't want to move. 12 millimeter on this bracket. 14 millimeter here. And this should come right out. Couple 14 millimeters on this bracket. And this chunk of aluminum comes out. There's a pin in the bottom of this that's holding it in. Sometimes they can be a little stickly. Hit it with a hammer. This is the block you got to get under and torch when these bolts get stuck. I've had it happen on the vans quite a bit. Well, there's some wires that are going to be in my way. These are just grounds. Okay. Then I got this wire loom. There's these tabs right here I pull back on. There's one way back here. That's as far up as that wire will go. I'm going to put a bungee cord under it just because. Whole bunch of 10 millimeters for this cover. Oh, I see some fancy stuff in there now. Ooh, nice. We have a winner. I should have like one more bolt for this cover, I think, but I'm going to get that from underneath. And in the meantime, I'm going to try to get these belts off of here. I have a 14 millimeter for this alternator. I'm just going to loosen this bolt up. I have a 12 millimeter here. This hole for this alternator should be slotted, so I should be able to loosen it up just enough to get this thing off of here. Just like that. Then I have an adjuster bolt, 12 millimeter. Loosen that up a turn or two. Then I have a 12mm here I can just get with a really super long extension and a 1/4-inch drive swivel, like so. Now towards the driver's side of the bottom of the radiator below the fan, I got a drain I can just get with a pair of pliers. I'm just going to unscrew this until it starts dribbling out. Kind of strange, this thing wasn't leaking at all when it showed up here. And now that it's sitting with no pressure in the radiator and it's cold, it's just coming right out. I have a bracket for this power steering, 12mm. I'm going to have to use a puller to get this pulley off. I got a washer here. By the way, if you need to get bolts for this, these are 8x125. Couple more 10mm. Oh wow. Yeah. I found a watering hole. It's like this pump's kind of in my way a little bit. Pull that down. Now one more hiding on me right here. I gotta get that cover out from the top. I think I have 3 more 12mm bolts to get this aluminum bracket off. Now these studs and bolts, they gotta go off and on with the bracket because there's not enough room to get the bolts out. I have an E8 reverse Torx, and these are supposed to get these out. One more 12mm. There is a way to sneak this water pump out without removing this metal cover that's behind the camshaft gears. But this thing's got some camshaft seals that are leaking in it. I got new seals with this kit, so I might as well put them in. I gotta smooth that crankshaft out though, because the last person that worked on it used a pipe wrench on it, so that gear is not gonna come off. There's a mark on the harmonic balancer for 0, and then I put the bottom pulley cover on. There's timing marks on the cover. So I got that lined up with 0, and I got the mark on the pulley on the 0. And there's a groove right here for the camshaft sprocket, and you can see that it's a tooth off. Both of the gears. This one's always really hard to see, the one in the back. I took the balancer off, and there's a little dot on the crankshaft pulley, and there's a little mark on the oil pump right here. So you know it's lined up at 0 like that. I can go ahead and take this washer off, tapered side out. Now I'm going to want to turn the crankshaft counterclockwise about 60 degrees just to make sure that all the pistons are down far enough to where it's not going to hit valves if I do something stupid, because I got to loosen up the camshaft bolts. There's a couple ways of turning this thing. You can put the bolt back in it and try to turn it counterclockwise somehow. You can use a MacGyver wrench and put it on the key. That way you won't mar up the crankshaft like the last guy did with the pipe wrench. I have an 1.25" 6-point socket. I think it's about a 36mm. You can just put it on there and it hits the key just right. Now I need to loosen up these crankshaft bolts. I got a pulley holder here. I just taped it onto a pipe just because. And this goes inside of these sprockets. And when you use these, you just got to make sure that you're not caught up on these little 10mm bolts for the cover, because if you are, you can snap those right off. And I'm just going to put this in here. Put a 17mm on the bolt. I got a jack pole I can use too, just for a little extra leverage, because these are really tight. I just want to loosen them. I don't know, I've had this for a while. I think I got it at Napa. Now I can go ahead and turn this crankshaft back to 0. I got 2 bolts for this tensioner I can take off. These are 12 millimeters. Sneak this out. I have a 10 millimeter Allen on this tensioner pulley. There should be a washer behind this too. You want to make sure you don't lose that washer. It just kind of fell on me right there. That goes behind here like this. Now this belt can come off, or what's left of it anyways. Wow, look at that. There's just a bolt just sitting here from God knows what. I see a nut behind the cover too, just laying there. Well, this job's getting spookier and spookier by the minute. This little piece of metal here, it's a tab to try to keep the timing belt from jumping a tooth. And I'm going to take the sprocket off and inspect that crankshaft seal. So I'm going to take this off. I wouldn't be surprised if it bent a little bit. Yeah, it looks kind of straight still. And of course, this should just slide right off, and it might not because the previous person that worked on this hacked the heck out of the crankshaft. I'm going to clean it up a little more until this sprocket slides off the way it's supposed to. There's a 14 millimeter on this idler, and I can get these sprockets off the rest of the way with a 17 millimeter. I have what looks like 6 10 millimeters on this cover plate. Looks like I got a little wire tie held on right here. I'm just gonna rip this off with a needle nose. And I can get my free nut. So far I got a free bolt and a free nut out of the deal. I wonder where those go. I'm gonna hose this filthy animal down with a little more brake cleaner. Looks like she's got a valve cover leak in the front too. Now when you take out these seals, you want to try not to mar up the surface of the camshaft because the camshaft's actually quite soft. The old school trick with these is to use a drill bit and an angled drill. So I'm just going to drill a couple of holes in this thing. I'm just going to take it real easy with real light pressure. I think I'm using like a 7/32 drill bit for this. Now I got a couple of stainless steel screws I had laying around. It's probably easiest to use a hex head screw too, but I don't have one and I'm not going to the hardware store to get them. Just go a little at a time and it should pull this thing out. And in this case, it's not working at all. Nice try. Claw hammer time. Ooh, there it goes. I got it. I normally don't do this, but these seals are kind of weird. They got a big lip on them, so I put a little bit of oil on the outside of the seal. I got a chunk of 1.5" PVC, and I made my own seal installer. This is like a 12.125 bolt. Anytime you make a tool for a seal installer, you just want to make sure that it's pushing on the outside of the seal too and not the inside, because if you push on the inside of the seal, it'll crush it inwards. So I'm just going to run this flush. I just barely put any pressure on there, and then I'll just tap the washer a little bit just to make sure it's seated all the way around. I just got to do the same to the back one. I'm going to approach this crankshaft seal the same way. I got to go a little bit at an angle too because I'm hitting the crankshaft. Piece of cake. I'm going to hit this with some brake cleaner on a rag. I just want to make sure the surface is nice and dry. Now this seal had no lubricant on the inside, so I put a little motor oil on that. And the outside I want to leave completely dry. And this is getting the pipe treatment. I think this was an old chunk of conduit. This is one of my seal installers, and it's just a hair larger than the bore diameter of this oil pump. And the seal's just a little bit smaller, but it's going to go on the outside of it real nice. I just want to tap it in real easy. Now I can put this gear back on. I'm going to stick a random bolt in this tensioner hole for now. When I take out the water pump, I don't want any water getting in my engine. That's an open hole, I think. I think I got 5 more 10mm bolts for this water pump. I'm not going to take them off yet either. I'm just going to loosen them up a little bit because this thing's going to flush coolant all over the place. So I'm just going to tap on this pulley a little. Get it to loosen up. And then I'm just going to let it drip nice and slow. I think the thing's done dribbling. Looks like some cheesy, cheap aftermarket pump of some kind. Doesn't say Japan or anything anywhere on it. I'm just going to get a razor blade after this surface. Get this cheesy gasket off of here. I got a brake bleeder here. I'm going to suck out as much coolant out of this hole as I can. Now that I sucked up all that coolant, I'm ensured that it's not going to go dripping all over my surface here. I got some brake cleaner on a rag. I'm just going to wipe this surface down and make sure there's no coolant on it. I got to do this because this machine surface doesn't look real good anymore. It looks a little corroded. And I'm going to have to use gasket sealant just to make sure it's going to seal. With this pump, I got this cheesy gasket. Under the circumstances, this might work the best because that machine surface is all messed up. These are really good gaskets that came with the kit. If I still got a really clean, flat machine surface, these go right on and I wouldn't need any sealant or anything, and they work very well. But the way this thing is, I'm not trusted anything. I don't think I'm going to use this paper gasket. It's got a little tear in it. I'm going to ultra gray this bad boy. I don't know, I put about 1/8 of an inch bead on here. I'm just going to slather it around. I'll do the other side too. There, I just got a nice fine bead of silicone absolutely everywhere. I got about 10 minutes before this gets tacky and starts setting up, so I got to stick this on there. Okay, I slapped that gasket on. I didn't press it down or anything either. It's just resting in the pins. Now I'm just going to snug these down a little bit. I should see gasket sealant squishing out of this thing all the way around it. Just a little bit of sealant. I got these all snugged down pretty good. Now I want to torque these to 71 inch-pounds. I can put my tensioner bearing on. This calls for blue Loctite, I think. 25 foot-pounds. I just want to make sure this moves really nice, and it does. I wipe this grimy cover down a little bit and put this back on. I can torque these bolts to 80 inch-pounds. I put a little blue Loctite on these camshaft sprocket bolts. As you can see, it's still a tooth off. This groove right here needs to line up with this mark right here. So I'm just going to turn it by hand just a little bit. And I got to do the same thing with the rear. And the rear camshaft sprocket is kind of hard to look at. So I got a mirror I can stick in here, and this one's got to get backed up a little bit too. Oh, that went too far. It's on a cam lobe, so fun. That looks right. I can't really show you what I'm doing because it's hard to see. I can put this idler bearing on. I don't need to put any Loctite on this one. This gets torqued to 32 foot-pounds. Now this belt is kind of a directional thing. It says front, so that's facing towards the engine. And then these dots, that goes on the crankshaft. And then you got lines that go on the cams. There's a mark on the cam, lines up with the mark on the cam. Just like that. I'm going to do the front one first, just because. You don't want to crimp this down with anything that might ruin the belt, but I got hose pinchers I like using. And then it goes under this pulley, and then on the other one. And that other mark should line up with the mark on that pulley. Put a pincher down on this one. I got a smaller one for the rear. Now on this belt, the drive side is facing the front, so it's this side, and the other side where the tensioner is, that's the driven side. Now the reason why I say this is because the driven side should always be loose and the drive side should be tight. So I'm going to want to wrap this around the water pump. I'm going to want this around the tensioner side. Make sure the belt is going around that rear pulley really nice. Okay, that should be right. I have the grooves on the sprockets lined up, and these dots on the crankshaft is supposed to be on the first touched sprocket tooth on the drive side of the belt. So I know that's right. And this dot, I never knew what the heck they have that for, but this dot right here is lined up with that dot right there, so that's right. Now that I got all of these lined up too, I want to make sure that the drive side has a little bit of tension on it, and there's a little bit of tension in between the cams. And the only thing that's loose is this portion of the belt, the driven side of the belt. I'm just going to run my hand around here and make sure that it's on all the grooves on the pulley back here. And then the crankshaft, you can see it moved. So I can put that on like that. I'm going to toss on this tensioner, get a little bit of tension on here. Now I can tighten this tensioner to 20 foot-pounds. Mark on the groove, lined up there. And on the rear I got the mark on the groove. And that one's lined up. I'm going to put this little keeper thingamajiggy on here. And I might as well pull this tensioner pin. Everything should be tight now, everywhere. I'm going to turn this counterclockwise 60 degrees again. I want to tighten these cam pulleys to 92 foot-pounds. Now if I really want, I can crank it over 2 revolutions just to make sure everything's kosher with this. After I do that 2 revolutions too, these marks on all the belts, they won't line up anymore. It all looks good. And I wiped off most of the gooey belt crud off of here. I can put this back on. I put the nuts back on the studs too so they don't fall out when I'm trying to squirrel this thing in here. I'm going to get out my E8 reverse torques and screw these studs in first. I don't want to torque these down or anything either. I just want to bottom them out and then loosen them up about a half a turn. That way I know they'll come out again. Then I want to tighten these 4 bolts to 21 foot-pounds. I cleaned a bunch of goo and junk off the inside of this cover. I would tighten these down to about 71 inch-pounds. I have to loosen this bolt back up again. I forgot about the bracket for the alternator. I can squirrel this alternator bracket back on. Tighten this nut back down to 21 foot-pounds again. Now I can put this washer on. And I can throw on this balancer. There's harmonic balancer installers, but I don't think I'm going to need one. Dead blow hammer. I put a little motor oil on the threads and a little motor oil in between the washer and the bolt, just so I can get the right torque on this thing. I want to torque this bolt to 162 foot-pounds. I'm going to do this power steering belt next, put this bracket on. I have no idea what Toyota was thinking when they made such a thing. But you just got to find a place to pry on this without wrecking anything. That spot seems like as good as any. When you think you got it tight enough, you should only be able to turn this belt a quarter of a turn. Probably be a good idea just to get it a hair tighter if it's a brand new belt. Just gonna snug that up a little to hold it there. I could get it a little bit tighter. That should be good. I'm gonna tighten both of these bolts down to 32 foot-pounds. Same for this top bolt on this power steering. I'm going to get in here with a mid-well socket. I'm actually going to try to get a torque wrench up here and tighten this to 32 foot-pounds too. This cover can go back on. Now for the alternator air conditioning belt. Same deal here. I'm just going to tighten it up until I can turn it a quarter turn. That feels good right there. And since it's a new belt, I'll go just a little bit more. I'm going to try to get a torque wrench in here and tighten this to 21 foot-pounds. And this big alternator bolt I'm going to do to 40 foot-pounds. Just going to line up that pin. I'm going to start these two bolts. I won't get them tight yet. Plug these grounds in. Start all these. I'm just going to snug all these down. All these 14mm bolts I'm going to torque to 40 foot-pounds. Then this little 12mm guy I'm going to do at 21. Well, since I don't have any parts left, I guess I can see if this thing runs. It runs. I got some global coolant here. I don't buy into that vehicle-specific Toyota brand stuff. I just put global in everything. It works. I'm just going to fill it up. I'm going to run the car, get it up to operating temperature, make sure the thermostat opens and the fans turn on so the system burps and I get all the air out of it. And then I'm going to put a tire on it, 80 foot-pounds on the tire, on the lug nut, and call it a job. Okay, bye.